Thank you for joining us. My name's Paul Heinemann. I'm currently the Executive Director at the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, leading our audit program. In this session, I am very fortunate to be joined by a fantastic, very experienced panel. I have Sarah, Mareza and Ellie with us today, and a really fantastic opportunity, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. So in this session, we're really looking forward to a really strong conversation with you in relation to workforce governance. And what is workforce governance? We're going to cover that, what it looks like, and how providers can ensure that they are meeting their obligations. Can I just check that everyone can hear me okay? Beautiful, thank you. It's hard to tell up front. So you've probably realised already that today's parallel sessions are structured into provider registration categories. This session is focused on providers delivering personal and transitional care in registration categories 4 and 5. And we're aware that your governance challenges around workforce can vary from those in other settings. So we really want this to be a conversation, so I really do encourage you to come up and use the microphones or to submit your questions through the conference app. Sorry, excuse me for a second. We're going to start with some Mentimeter slides, just with some initial questions to get a feel for the understanding and people's feelings about certain aspects of governance in your organisations. So you should be able to see the first question, and if people would, I'll just give people a moment to, again, scan the app and put their answers in. Because very curious, and I'm assuming we're probably going to get a bit of a diversity of answer here as well. So hopefully soon we'll start seeing results appearing. Beautiful. Yeah, wow. Look, we'll move through that pretty quickly, but it does show a variety in people's perspectives on how their board understands the obligations. But what I'm saying is that there is generally a good confidence here in their board's understanding, which is positive to hear. We'll move to the next question, please. Now, this one is, how ready do we think they are to meet these obligations? It's good to understand what your obligations are, but we understand it's a different proposition to actually be ready to meet them. Yeah, wow. No, obviously people believe they're on track, so still work being done in progress, but good to see that there is a general level of confidence, I think, looking at those results, that we'll get to where we need to be. Can we have the third and final one, please? This is an interesting one. I know you've already probably been in sessions about operational governance, and it is a balance. They're both very, very important aspects. So what is the balance of their effort and focus between operational governance and workforce governance? Yeah, I'm not surprised. I would have thought that a bit too operational was probably going to be the biggest one, but it's good to see that there is a general feeling of a decent level of balance between them. All right, we'll quickly move off that and on to the content before we get into some question and answer. So the first thing you'll see on the screen there is the statement of principles. Now, the statement of principles, I think, is central to everything we do in relation to our workforce and our governance of our workforce. And I think just in reflection from previous sessions, we would have heard, I think, really clearly in multiple contexts, how the Statement of Rights is really the foundation of the new Aged Care Act. And really, well, governance is the foundation of a good organisation. And I'm a firm believer in any organisation, your people are your most important assets. So governance of your workforce and your people is absolutely critical to success. Sorry, I will lose that bit of paper. So what is workforce governance? At its simplest definition, it's really the combination of governance oversight of the systems, processes and procedures that providers have that guides how they manage the workforce to deliver high care, safe, quality care. So the workforce is key, and obviously governance oversight of that is critical to ensuring that you're managing the risks around that. And I think in the areas of service that you guys are offering, it's harder necessarily to see those risks. So governance and assurance over that is even more important than in a residential setting. So workforce governance encompasses how the provider ensures that its workforce capability and capacity meets what is required to provide high quality care to older Australians. And it also is all about how they manage the risks of harm to the older Australians, but also to workers themselves. As I said, most important asset. We need to protect that asset. So this means the workforce governance includes your processes to manage and plan for current and future workforce needs, ensuring that your workers are suitably skilled, competent, qualified, experienced, supported and supervised, and trained to meet those outcomes of high quality care that we all seek. So essential to this is the processes that you have to recruit, screen, engage and supervise. And I'm probably going to really say that supervise word a lot because I think that's key, particularly in the context that we're talking today. And that's all workers engaged in your organisations and those engaged through associated providers and also through digital platform operators. Ultimately, the responsibility does sit with the approved registered provider. And we all know that a highly skilled, well-rewarded and valued workforce is vital to success of the aged care sector. Now, the new Aged Care Act recognises this. And as you can see on the screen when I hit the button and lose my page, apologies. Oh dear. Oh, my apologies, everyone. Okay. So as you can see, one of the Act statement of principles is an aged care system that values workers and carers. This means the aged care system must support funded aged care services being delivered by a diverse, trained and appropriately skilled workforce that is valued and respected. Workers must be empowered to provide feedback, suggest measures and take actions that support innovation, continuous improvement and the delivery of high quality care, which we also see strengthened in the quality standards. And we need workers to participate in governance and accountability mechanisms related to the delivery of aged care services. All right, so what is good workforce governance now that we've covered what workforce governance is? So building on the context of workforce governance, it is really important to discuss good workforce governance and its importance. Now, good workforce governance ensures older people accessing government-funded aged care have that continuity of safe, high quality and person-centred care in line with the Statement of Rights. It ensures that aged care providers support their workforce to deliver care in a way that aligns with the statement, and it ensures that risks associated with the workforce, such as competency gaps, shortages or vacancies and regulatory responsibilities are identified, monitored and effectively managed. And where needed, mitigation strategies are identified and implemented. So, what do we expect from Category 4 and 5 providers, workers and governing bodies when it comes to good workforce governance? Now, we expect that every registered provider, it will guide their decisions, actions and behaviours based on the Statement of Principles and invest in their workforce. All registered providers must ensure their workers are appropriately screened, trained and experienced to do the job that they are employed to do. Providers must establish and continue a quality of care advisory body that includes a staff member directly involved in the delivery of care. We need the voice of the workers. And we need to let providers need to let the Commission know about changes to your circumstances, which can include changes to responsible persons, governance or associated provider arrangements. All registered providers, their workers and responsible persons must act in a way that is consistent with the Aged Care Code of Conduct. Registered providers must take reasonable steps to prevent and respond to behaviours inconsistent with the code. Now, the final part of Paul talking, and we'll get to more interesting people very shortly, is finally you must demonstrate conformance with Strengthened Quality Standard 2, which is called the organisation. Under this standard, you are responsible for having a workforce strategy that makes sure there are enough qualified workers with the right skills to deliver quality and safe care and services. You must have a workplace where people are healthy and safe, and you must have systems that allow you to confirm your workers' qualifications, experience and skills before you hire them. Look, that's enough for me. I'm going to now ask my panellists to share their observations about workforce governance in their contexts. So firstly, I think I'll ask Sarah. Would you be able to provide some insight to the room on workforce governance in your context?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. So one of the primary considerations and what was also raised by Commissioner Briggs is how we provide appropriate and meaningful supervision to staff. So for me, supervision is the function for which accountability to our clients and our regulatory requirements is maintained. Support and professional development for our staff is provided, and connection with our organisation is nurtured so that staff feel valued and are more likely to speak up when there are issues or when things go wrong. So this in turn generates transparency and hopefully better outcomes for older people. Also compliance with our regulatory requirements and a staff group that is both confident and competent to undertake their jobs. Retention rates may also be increased when staff feel connected, supported and valued in the workplace. And we know the financial costs of high turnover rates and the cost to recruit and onboard new staff. So it's a win-win. One of the barriers that can be faced, though, is how staff may view supervision if they haven't really done it before. So building a culture around what supervision is and how it links back to these functions is critical to ensure supervision is viewed as a positive function within the organisation, as well as a workforce governance requirement. So having a well-defined framework and consistent approaches to supervision across the organisation is really important, but also training for both supervisors and supervisees. So there's clear expectations on both the supervisors and those people receiving the supervision. Of course, in a sector where the margins can be pretty tight, the cost of non-billable hours is always going to be taken into consideration. So flexible solutions will need to be looked at, and that's going to be different for every single provider, whether you're a very small or very large provider. However, given that staffing is generally the biggest cost and highest risk a provider has, it's well worth the investment. From recruitment to onboarding and induction, through to supervision, training and retention, investment in these areas will provide better outcomes for older people, greater compliance and hopefully improve financial viability in the long run, because you're going to see those turnover rates, reduce with any luck. When I think things do get a bit tricky or certainly more complex is when you have a large volume of subcontracted services or people delivering those services. So as a provider, we still hold all the responsibility and the risk, regardless of whether they're our staff, someone else's or individual contractors. As a provider, we need to ensure we have well-established systems in place and to ensure that the subcontracted agencies also have them in place and are adhering to the requirements that we have. We cannot devolve the responsibility nor the risk. They are ours, and so we really need to carefully consider how we actually manage that. Which then leads us to consider how do we monitor and verify that what we think and expect is happening is actually happening. So a great mechanism is feedback, certainly not the only mechanism, but feedback from both our clients that we work with and also our staff. So we need to make the feedback process accessible and safe. And usually this comes from a multitude of ways, and we need to look at how our older people and our staff actually engage with us, and what channel of communication is really going to be the most appropriate to get honest and timely feedback. Sorry, this is going on for a bit while. I have lots of reflections though. So, and I'm sure many of us in the room and online, have heard over the years older people who have said, I don't want to make a fuss, or, I don't want to get my worker into trouble. And providing regular communication about the purpose of feedback can be a really important strategy. So it's seen as something positive, even when things aren't going so well. And I think that's a really common theme that's been threaded throughout the last 2 days. So, for example, if we talk regularly about the importance of when we know something, we can do something about it and we can improve on it. And also how we undertake investigations when needed, and how we support, educate and develop our staff when things maybe aren't going so well and they need some additional support. So it's not just about being punitive as a reaction to the feedback. Having said that, we also need to be open about if something does really go wrong, and they do, we are accountable and we really need to do something about it. In terms of staff, we also need to support a culture of workplace safety and providing an environment where staff feel safe to speak up is so critically important. So this may not just be in relation to big things that aren't going so well, that may actually fall under the whistleblower protections, but it might also be around items for improvement and suggestions that they may have that could lead to continuous improvement initiatives and, consequently better outcomes for older people. And we really need to encourage and support this from the board down.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And the key reflection for me in that is communication. It's very similar when we're talking about the rights of the people we're entrusted to care for. Our workers have wants and expectations and outcomes they desire, and I think communicating is key. So thank you very much. Marisa, can I ask you to reflect, please?
Paul. I suppose sitting here with a board member's hat on and thinking in that context of strategy. So really, as board members, we need assurance. We need assurance from the exec that we're on track in terms of that sustainability piece. So if you think now we're going into a world of stricter funding, a 10% funding envelope for care management and activity-based billing, I want assurance that we're right-sizing the workforce. So we're not overshooting it, not undershooting it. What do we do to work out that piece of the puzzle, what we're going to need going forward. And the skill mix, obviously, and the attraction, retention piece, of course, is in there as well. So I just wanted to put that in because there is that difference, that above and below the line, when you think of the board member. Yes, we need to educate ourselves and be across the Act and our obligations, but I don't want to roll up to board meetings and get dragged into operational. I need to be assured of those top-level KPIs and measures that we need to track and measure month on month, and be assured that we're on track to meet our strategic goals, and within now that stricter funding envelope that we're all facing, and that we've got the systems to support that. So in terms of workforce governance, I suppose it's more than compliance. It's about shaping that future of care through that leadership piece, the culture piece. And it's not just your policies and checklists, although there is your framework to support the work that you do, but it reflects that living commitment to the wellbeing of clients and staff. And everything we talked about yesterday about valuing and respecting our clients. Clients are in one column, but actually I would say our workforce is in the centre. We've got to get that right and value and respect our workers, and then the clients after that. Because if we don't have the people piece right, we won't be delivering that quality care to our clients. Embedding governance into organisational DNA. So again, you'd all have your set of values for your organisation. So it's how we embed those in what we say and what we do each day. And Craig, if he's here, I was saying to my colleagues that Craig Gear was saying yesterday, that statement of rights that we talk about, and rights for workers too, it's in those daily moments that we bring those rights to life, isn't it? It's in all. It's in this. It's highly symbolic. Our behaviours and the rituals we engage in every day, and our managers and what we do in our work every day, that gives that message and brings those rights to life. Not just for clients, but rights of workers too, and their safety in the workplace. So embedding the values of the respect, inclusion and accountability that guide our decisions from recruitment through to development. Moving beyond that reactivity to a proactive, innovative culture. I could go on and on about proactive care management. With my other hat with LPA, we do a whole session on proactive care management and why that will be important in the new world, given the stricter funding envelope. Being proactive and mindful in how we're using these, the tighter dollars out there in an activity-based world. Recognition is a great place to work. So JBCA, Just Better Care Australia, has been recognised 2 years in a row as a great place to work, which is fantastic. And that speaks volumes about how staff feel about rolling up to work every day, feeling passionate and recognised and valued in what they do. This demonstrates our ongoing commitment to them and their wellbeing and their engagement. That flows through to how they interact then with clients on the ground. That's what we're trying to achieve here. Outcomes for our people, our teams, and therefore good outcomes for clients on the ground. Right through to the frontliners in the homes as well, our direct care workers. The shared responsibility for workforce governance. So it doesn't solely sit just with management or HR. It's owned at all layers, from board members down to your leadership team and all layers through your organisation. We all have a piece here around owning that culture and how we act day in, day out and interact with each other, and that respect. And we were just talking before we came in here today, in all that we do and say and do in this human services sector, how would I want to be treated when I'm on package? I know what I'm going to want with my app. How would you want your mum and dad to be treated? It's just that simple question. How would you want to be treated, really, going into an aged care, in the aged care service system now, if it was you there in that seat? The board, I suppose, I see myself as champion. As a board member, it's really about that championing piece. So championing the investment in capability, in training, in technology and wellbeing initiatives. We also do, risk came up before, I think Paul mentioned it, we also do have a role as board members to also identify risk. It's not just the domain of the exec. Board members have a role here in identifying risk as well and looking about the strategies of how we're going to mitigate that going forward. Active engagement with staff, so that regular dialogue with staff and understanding the real world challenges and ensuring governance frameworks are practical and grounded. Also, board members walking the floor, engaging with your teams, asking the questions, really getting appreciation what your people are doing day in, day out. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that with JBCA going forward. That's that education and learning piece. If we can each know each other's roles and that greater in-depth understanding there, I think that creates for better engagement and appreciation really of a well-oiled organisation and therefore better care outcomes. Agile and forward-thinking approach, anticipating the workforce trends and regulatory changes. I keep thinking of digital, I keep thinking of AI. Small, quick story. Went to my GP last week, usual just normal health checkup. The whole session, she recorded the whole lot of case notes in my session with her, beautifully typed up through AI because it listened to our whole conversation when I was sitting at her desk. Wonderful, efficient. She'll just go back and spell check it now and we've got a great summary of my consult with her. How will you be using AI respectfully, safely? Have you got a policy around that going forward? This will have an impact on your workforce strategy. Who will you need going forward in that space when we think digital, when we think AI? What will the skill mix be? Will it mean you can reduce FTE? I didn't say that, but what does it mean in terms of headcount? Rationalisation, more efficiency, better use of resources. Adapting your systems to evolving care models, again, the digital platforms, the subcontracting piece, self-management. What platforms will you put in place to make that really easy? I think I'll be one of those self-managers, probably a client from hell, because I've done case management and I'm happy to case manage myself. Anyway, overall vision then is that good workforce governance, it means it's the leadership piece, it's your culture piece. Culture plan. Adaptability and creating that environment where both your workforce, firstly your workforce and therefore your clients can thrive and feel valued and supported. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And look, really key thing for me in there is how powerful the message is of what you measure, because it tells your organisation, your staff, what you care about. And from a board's perspective, transparency on that and being able to articulate why are we measuring this is really powerful, because culture's key in all of this, and I think you touched on that. Thank you so much. Now, Ellie, I'm going to ask you to give a pretty quick summary of how's the Commission look at this? What's the Commission's regulatory approach? Thanks.
Thanks, Paul, and hi everyone. Just a very quick reflection from some of the themes from yesterday. We certainly have seen culture come through quite a lot, and we've obviously seen discussion about having a supported and well-trained workforce, and that will tie in obviously to our conversation this afternoon. I just wanted to make a comment for anyone that was at the dinner last night. We obviously had a very entertaining session from Jean Kitson, but there was a comment that she made in that I thought ties really nicely into what we're talking about today. She talked about, people say it takes a village to raise a child, but she reflected on needing a village to make sure that our elders have safe harbour in that last phase of their lives as well. And I thought that was really, I just felt like that really stuck with me last night, to think about our workforce and this setting and, your workforce as providers as being part of that village that we want, to look after our elders. And I think the governance piece around this is the structure and the frameworks and such that providers can have in place to make sure that village is the right village that we want looking after our people and, delivering those quality outcomes. And I think, like Marisa, like you said, getting that people piece right is the key bit to then making sure that village is looking after people and delivering the outcomes that we want. So Paul, specifically on, I guess, the perspective of the regulator, obviously at the Commission we recognise that providers are all different, and, we've seen that come through in the questions just in the last session in this room. So I think naturally governance for providers is going to look different depending on your setting. And as we've talked about, there's some real challenges where your workforce is outsourced, and I think that's why that governance piece and the structures that providers have in place to, assure themselves of that workforce being appropriate and delivering the care and so on, that structure is kind of the key piece there. So we certainly recognise that there are differences there, but, and that there are those challenges. But like Sarah said, you can't outsource the responsibility, so you do need to have the structures in place to manage those risks and to be proactive about that, I think. So from the perspective of a regulator, obviously, like we've spoken about in sessions yesterday, and, I think as Gary said, we're risk-based, we're proportionate, as fair as possible, but firm when necessary. So we never are starting our engagement or leading with enforcement action or that kind of heavy-handed sort of regulatory toolkit that, we do have. We are always starting from a fair, balanced and effective approach and looking at the risks that we're trying to deal with and being as fair as possible and using the right tools at the right time to engage with that risk. So we'll always try to understand from providers what the risks are, get a full sense of the situation that we're dealing with, so that we can work out what the appropriate steps are for managing those risks. We will always try to seek assurance from providers about what they're doing to work towards compliance. And where there is non-compliance, we will work with providers in a collaborative way, like we spoke about, like I said, in some of the sessions yesterday, to make sure that we're all working towards the same objective, to make sure that that quality of care is being delivered. And as I said, we're escalating only to use those regulatory tools if we need to, if we think it's necessary to deal with the risks presented to the people in our care. And I think ultimately we are all trying to achieve the same thing here, is making sure that risks are managed so that older people are getting quality care. And, like I said, making sure we've got that village in terms of this topic today to make sure that people are getting that care. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's a really important point, and I did hear it mentioned in the session before, but our goal is to ensure you understand the obligations, you're enabled to meet them, and we want to support, and because we all have the same North Star. I think if you looked at all our vision and purpose statements, they're pretty aligned. We're after the same outcome, which is really, gives us a great starting point. Now, we're into Q&A time, so I will encourage anyone who would like to come forward to the microphones, remembering we have an online audience today, so you make sure you are asking your question into the microphone. And we have someone.
I'll be first up.
Thank you.
Sarah from MCCI. You talked a lot about qualifications and a trained workforce. One of the things that we struggle with is that people are getting qualifications, but they're not actually able to do the work. They're being assessed as competent, but they're clearly not competent. And that's not just at Cert 3 level, that's all the way through to nurses, allied health professionals, etc. What role does or can the Commission play in working with the vet and tertiary education sector to really lift the skills and make sure that people are coming out, and so that we can feel confident as providers that people with those qualifications are able to do their jobs?
That's a really good question, and a very good question, and I will offer anyone in the panel. Ellie, did you want to?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that is a really good question. And, I'm thinking of this just as a perspective of, in my role at the Commission, I'm a leader. I obviously manage staff to do the work that we're doing at the Commission. And, I think that's a challenge probably in any context around people might have the piece of paper to say they can do the role, but getting them in and actually seeing them do the role is a different question, like you said. And, I think that, and perhaps Sarah and Marisa will have some context to provide around that practical implementation of that. But, I suppose it comes down a little bit to the sorts of on-the-job training and things like that, or the supervision that you might have in place to see that people are actually boots on the ground doing the things that you expect them to be doing. Because I think, as we know, like I said, in any setting, the piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean the person is going to be doing what you expect them to be doing. And I think that ties in a little bit to that, like I said, the sort of on-the-job training, making sure those people know what your expectations are as a provider, what the regulatory requirements are that they also have to deliver on when they're kind of delivering that workforce. But perhaps Sarah and Marisa might have something more useful to say.
I might just jump in there as well. If it's nationally accredited training, that they do have, review schedules and a whole curriculum review process, and did work in the education sector for a while previously. I think it's really important that you guys get to have a voice in that, curriculum redevelopment, and I'd be leaning into your peak and professional bodies who I can only hope and assume are actively engaged in that curriculum redevelopment, because we know context changes all the time, and I'm sure training 20 years ago has had to, in all industries, has had to modify, and as we know in our industry, change is quite rapid. So we need that education and support, especially in those professional qualifications, to adapt with the changing context. So whilst in terms of role for the Commission, it's probably more about the industry. What does the industry say we need as a skill set to meet those obligations? Because again, we don't want to limit your innovation in the how. We know what the goal and what good looks like, but we need to allow you guys, again, But when it comes to professional qualifications, I'd reach out to your industry groups because they should, if they don't, and they are here with us today, have a voice in those curriculum development processes.
Yeah, we absolutely will. I think it's just, as the regulator, how do you work across other parts of different sectors, which really have a massive impact on our ability to provide safe, high-quality care, which is the rest of it. We're all trying to do it, but we need to have some confidence that people aren't doing a 6-week online course and coming out with a piece of paper but have never actually helped someone and, mobilise or manual handling. And this is the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think, when we take someone through the door, regardless of what piece of paper, and I think it's Ellie's point, we've still got to supervise them. What support, are they competent to do the role? What supports do they need? And, you can have someone with the greatest resume in the world, but you still got to test that.
Absolutely, and we do. I just think there should be an expectation.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point. Thank you.
And maybe a real opportunity, to take away and, for us as a, obviously as the commission, but also as a sector to think about what opportunities there might be to connect in there, yeah.
I might just add too, from a provider perspective, and I'm sure many of you out there and online have experience when you have done interviews with people, they've got the formal qualifications, relevant experience, and then they're out working with people and you think, oh my, and it does get back to that supervision and the values that we embed. And what we've done too is we introduced the buddy shifts, which probably some of you have as well, just to get eyes on our new staff members to see how they're actually interacting with people, because regardless of, it might be a 4-year degree they've done, it might be a 12-week course that they've done. If they can't communicate respectfully with the older people that we are providing services for, there's an intervention that we need to do. So making sure that cultural fit is really, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. 2 more brave people have come to the microphone, so we'll go. And everyone, there's lots of questions coming through the app as well, so thank you. But I will always give the brave people who have gone to the mic a chance. So thank you.
Okay. My name's Tina. So I'm actually have the question similar to the lady just asked, but I'm just having an idea, food for thought, for the Commission to consider. So myself is actually working in the operations side as a manager and the aged care, sitting on 2 boards. And the pressure on the provider is actually the associate provider. So talking about the qualification, and my background is allied health professional as well. So that's interesting here. So one thing I'm considering is, let's say, they study 4 years degree for the allied health professional and then come to the workforce to work as the aged care, NDIS. They do have a qualification, but when they can actually go into the workforce, whether they actually be being competent enough to do the job, that's a question mark. And then, as an allied health professional, they pay yearly for the renew to the APA, for the membership. My question in here is, they might have a CBD record, do the training, everything like that, but is it relevant to what they're doing? So the Commission, on one hand, is checking the provider, hey, have you actually checked the competency with the associate provider? The question in here is whether the Commission actually will work with the APA or any other association to actually make sure the competency is there. Yeah.
Yeah, look, that is a fantastic observation, and look, I think we'll put our hand up there as a commission. So there is a great opportunity for us to integrate with a whole range of other, I'll say shared stakeholders across the health system more broadly. Is there a follow-up there? Or?
No, I just say thank you. I just really just maybe put the thought for the Commission to consider.
No, it is something where we're looking at. We know there's a lot of, I'll say, synergy between our sector and other sectors and a lot of other stakeholders. We have got to lift our game in terms of, I think, better integration. You know, it'll
Definitely.
be more effective, more efficient. So it's a fantastic point. Thank you.
Because I feel the professional that pay yearly membership means something.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah, and we need it to mean something for us. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any reflections on that panel?
It's interesting you talk about the payment, the registration, and I just keep thinking about talent retention. So identifying the talent and perhaps, your clinicians you've got on board now and how we're going to retain them and do. Interesting to hear if any orgs pay actually for that registration cost. Perhaps a lot of them will to retain those incentives to retain your good people now, your clinicians, because, they'll be snapped up if you lose them. There's definitely a need out there in terms of clinically qualified, allied health and nurses out there. So just that cost of that registration too, sort of keeping that going and supporting that in your clinicians, in your team, I think is a key thing for management to consider as well, if you can fit that in your budget. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And
Sorry, I was just going to follow on from that. Actually, it's not the cost of registration that's prohibitive. It's usually the professional indemnity insurance, etc. So I think it's a reflection of understanding what the obligations of the professional is, and also when it comes to things like TAFE, there is the expectation of reasonable adjustment in a lot of the courses, which means that they might be training for a very, very physical job, for example, but they might not actually physically be able to do the job or have mental health challenges or whatever. But because of the way that learning and education is nowadays, that can challenge it as well. So I think we as providers need to actually understand that and recognise that our workforce, we need to be inclusive in our workforce as well and to adjust what we do and how we do practices to support those workers to actually skill up.
Look, that is a absolutely fantastic. There is talent out there, lots of talent, and in diverse pockets that probably traditionally we haven't capitalised on. I think that's an absolutely amazing point. There's a real opportunity there for us to be better in that regard. And we put that mirror up to ourselves as well in the Commission, because I think that's a universal challenge that we all need to embrace. Sorry, you've waited so patiently.
All good. I think my question dovetails really well with this conversation. My name is Joan. I work in a home care and RAC company. And one of the interesting things I've observed recently is that tension between the various legislations such as OH&S, Fair Work, and obviously the Commission obligations. And just looking at what supports, obviously looking at the workforce strategy, obligations, but obviously making sure, especially looking at home care, making sure that as a provider we understand our obligations, how to meet them in environments that we don't have any control over. And so we're understanding that, looking at what we can do from a scalable standpoint to ensure that we're providing that safety, that training, that competency, but then being able to measure that in environments that we do not have eyes or ears. So I just want to say what supports or what resources are available to help guide providers in navigating this very tough pathway.
Yeah, it's almost what does supervision look like? It's still a supervision need, and how do we do it in a different context? And I'll Marisa?
And you're so right, because I often think we put direct care workers out there. They are so vulnerable. We put them into a home. I've never gone into this environment before. Well, it was hard for the client too, a new set of eyes coming in. And hopefully we've covered off in terms of risk assessment, the environment, and you've ticked all those boxes, but still we put them out there and they bravely go forward to do the personal care shift or whatever it is. And you've all had them, those complaints that come back that something's gone missing from the home or something's gone down and it's he said, she said, because that is the environment. It's one versus one. So there's a risk on both, the client's vulnerable, the worker's vulnerable to an extent. So it's you're right, it's how do we shore up and cover off risk and looking at that environment, the client needs and preferences, ensuring as much information can get through as possible to that person filling the shift. Tricky when it's a brokered person, and remember, you'd all have your different apps or ways of engagement with those people you buy in, broker in, but then they also sell to lots of other organisations, so you're not all aligned to one platform. And I have visions of direct care workers out there being employed by a number of associate providers with half a dozen apps on their phone, with different shift notes coming in. that in itself is a vexed, wicked problem to deal with, I think, systemically going forward. But it's the how to. How do we tool them up and resource and educate them of what they're walking into, what's needed in that shift? All billable now, efficient use of time, filling the whole hour accountably, feeding back to care partner and covering off, because you have to evidence that the shift was actually came to pass. That's another tick box in the claiming, isn't it? And we're getting into the weeds now, but it's all of those, and I agree. They are. There's a lot of risk and vulnerability there for our direct care workers. So. Yeah, I don't know, Sarah, if you can add to that.
Oh, look, it's a really complicated space, and I don't think we're ever going to really be able to completely eliminate any risk that we've got. We've got, across the country, thousands and thousands of people going, right now are in older people homes, and I suppose getting back to that feedback and from older people, and that is why it's so important to really take the time to listen, to get that feedback from a variety of ways. And that might, we do annual surveys, we do regular check-ins, we do random just touch points to say, hey, how are we going? So just making sure that we're trying to cover off as best we can. We cannot eliminate every single risk, but we can do what we can as a provider to make sure we can do what we can within our power and within our scope of practice as well. So I don't think there's any final absolutes with this one. It is a really tricky space, and I think coming in as a provider, that is one of the biggest risks we've got. So,
and I think from the Commission's perspective, look, and I've heard it talked about in the previous session too. Like again, they won't be definitive or this is how you must do it, but I think we can provide some more case studies of what is working for providers. Share that information. I heard some examples, I think, in some of the sessions yesterday around consumer engagement officers, but to me, it's, again, like as a board, I think you've got to challenge yourself. What do I need to assure myself we're managing this risk appropriately? And how do I get that information? And I think we've got to challenge probably the assumptions we've had around how we've looked at, monitoring those risks previously, because context changes, and what was relevant, even a day ago, sometimes is no longer relevant. So what I expect of boards is they're inquisitive. They're challenging the norm. They're going, am I really assured by this information? Because that's the only way we're going to really actually know if we are. Otherwise, we just convince ourselves we are, which doesn't achieve the outcome. But great question, thank you. Sir, your turn.
Thank you. So my name's Steve. I work for Australian Unity, which is the largest home care provider in the country. So within our home care mix, we actually have a large and very growing amount of self-managed customers. And so I guess, Marissa, I'm probably setting up because of some of your reflections earlier about that self-managed customer and what they will desire. And we know that that will grow. What's really interesting that we find operationally with the self-managed customer is the view, particularly when we're comparing with the NDIS space around what people believe to be self-management. One of our real challenges is the approved provider responsibilities and educating the customer on what we must still be involved from a care management perspective and that oversight. And so what we find is that development of the care plan, those proactive case management check-ins, as you say, they're all of our risk management tools, and that's our governance that we use to have oversight. But what we find in our growing number of SIRS reports that come from neglect due to out-of-scope practice that we find is the customer is engaging their workers, and we have thousands of associated providers because that is the customer choice and control. We do have, obviously, invested a lot into the supply governance space because of the sheer volume that we manage. But it's that education piece to customer, particularly from the department and when they're set up, around understanding in an aged care and a supported home context in the future, what does it mean when you are getting this funding to be a self-managed customer, because the challenge that the care partner faces in communicating with the customer is they don't always believe that they should share that information with us. They don't see always the value of what we can actually bring to their lives, because people feel astute and that they can control and they know and they can make these decisions independently. So they don't always see the need or value of the provider, but we need to meet our obligations. And sometimes, obviously within thin markets, particularly in supported home, activity-based funding will not necessarily be there for us as a revenue stream in the self-managed space to the same degree. And so it's just, I guess it's from the Commission, that case study, particularly from the department, how do we set providers up for success to deliver a self-managed model?
I could see Ellie's going to respond, but I'm just going to say thank you, because what I heard there is, like, it again goes back to what we measure, like context, like you're scanning the environment, understanding what the cause of risk is going to be, what's going to make your risk realised, and that's continual because it changes. And I think that the expectation is on management, all staff, the board, because risk can be identified and cause of risk at all levels. And that was fantastic. So thanks for sharing. But Ellie, comment?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just make a very brief comment and then I might hand to Marisa. I was just thinking, you talked about the sort of like the consumer there, the care recipient kind of not always understanding what you can bring to the table, and, perhaps a lack of understanding of how some of those processes work and your obligations and that sort of thing. And, just thinking like with the sort of regulator hat on, and even thinking on behalf of the department a little bit, there's a real opportunity for us, I think, to be able to at least provide input into things like education and engagement materials, and putting, stuff out there for consumers. And again, this is the department. But, when they're signing up or entering the system in that way, making sure there's information there for them to understand what their obligations are, what you can bring to the table. And I think, again, from the Commission side of things, we're always looking for opportunities, I think, to provide and develop materials and guidance like that, on our website and so on. So I think there's, perhaps an opportunity to get in that front end piece there, and to have some better information out there for people to understand what they're getting into, I guess. But
yeah, and to you, I used to find when I was in operations land that the self-managed clients were often more work than managed client. The stories or complaints or issues that would come back up, even though this is supposedly self-managing. But anyway, it raises lots of legal questions, and getting that front-end client agreement right, if they're going down the self-management path, because you can't indemnify yourself as a approved provider under the Act, it does all stop with you, the buck stops with you. So it's all fun and games until it's not, and everything's going all right, and daughter's helping mum sort out things until something happens with one of the care workers, and it will come straight back to you. So, yeah, being clear around I don't know who you're signing up as associates, who they may use, that pool of workers, your service delivery partners, and yes, you are big and you would buy from lots of different service delivery partners, I'm sure. That's a big piece of work, that procurement piece, and keeping a lid on that quality and how you check in and audit that. The education piece for clients, that's huge. While we educate ourselves here at all levels in an organisation, the education piece for clients, because often if you do provide the full context and story and the parameters and scope of practice and the rules around clients you're getting that were business managers and accountants and all flowing into the system, they'll get it and appreciate it and be on board, because information is power. But yes, there will always be those ones that unfortunately accidents happen, or incidents, neglect, abuse. So even when they're not self-managed, that happens as well. So I think, yeah, more case studies, support perhaps from the Commission. There's some big, you probably use, Russell Kennedy, the big legal firms in terms of input to your client agreements. You can only shore that up so much. You're the one with the legal hat here. In terms of your obligations and responsibilities as an AP under the Act. So it's a tricky one in the human services sector, isn't it, to really get to really watertight, make that watertight. And these are the things, I suppose, as management teams and boards we grapple with month on month. Again, what are we measuring? What are we assuring ourselves with? Are we asking the right questions as board members each month? What are the questions we're asking through all that operational weed and the 300-page report, perhaps? Like, what are we getting to? What are the measures, that the incident reporting and those key and what are they telling us? What are they telling us about how we've supported our workers? Have they been supported and valued enough, which should feed into less incidents and more good client outcomes? It's all connected, isn't it? But yeah, so I don't have a straightforward, but I get you, I hear you, because it's an ongoing area to obviously keep shining a spotlight on that self-management. Maybe that a few of us can get together and really drill in and put something around self-management. There's probably just a whole handbook in that. So I think how to do it well. Yeah.
And I will just say, even with a regulator and a sort of a legal hat on, it's tricky from our perspective too. I mean, as a regulator, when you're dealing with, for example, complaints or even some of the sort of regulation of providers in this sort of context, it's tricky. It's challenging, and so I don't have answers or anything useful to add there. But I think I will just acknowledge it is a tricky area. So something like getting some heads together and thinking about the sorts of resources that might help with that is probably a really good idea.
What I would ask of all of you, though, I have a dream of this shopping cart of really good practice examples that we can, publish and allow you to. But we need to do that with you. Like, we can't do that for you because you guys have all the brilliant, innovative solutions to some of these challenges. So, again, I think you probably heard Gary Rake say this. Email address, you'll be able to find it very easily. I'd love to hear from you if you've got things that you think are good practice, things we can communicate. We'd love to work with you to produce a really strong suite of resources that we could all benefit from. So love to hear from you. We have 4 minutes left and there's some awesome questions that have come through the app. We're going to ask the first one, Marisa, of you, because I think it's in response to something you said earlier, and it's an interesting one. It was, how do board members walk the floor in home care?
It's funny. That term came to mind because last century, when I was working in the department, our branch head would actually walk the floor every night as we're closing up for the night, and he would walk the floor and talk to us about how our day went. And I always remember that, and it just made you feel heard and valued in your role back then. And the department was a very different place back then, but it holds true. So this is about how we. Our actions and the culture as well. But sorry, I should be holding up the mic. I think there's opportunities for boards out there to, whether it's getting out to the work sites or engaging perhaps through some of our structures we've got in place now through the CAB, the QCAB, some of those in the architecture in your committees. What's our role in those and partaking and involving in those, and especially with, when I think of staff forums or bringing your key staff together, whether it's the morning tea or having some anchor points through the year, where it's almost that town hall where you get all layers of the organisation and sharing the stories or what's gone well or things that are worrying them and waking them at 3 a.m. as they go to work every day in the pressures. Not just those people in the office, but the direct care workers as well, which is hard when some of them are all brokered and dispersed, but perhaps even starting with your in-house ones, if you have in-house direct care workers, making that happen. Hard to bring them out of the field, I know. What's the best time of the week to do it? You've got to think laterally around that. But I think we have to be purposeful in getting that face-to-face and the conversations, breaking down those barriers, because really it's alignment from the top to the bottom. It's congruency in vision, purpose, your mission, your strategy and your values, isn't it? It's getting that congruency and alignment from the top to the bottom and all working to your strategic roadmap for the good of your client. So it's, there's probably different ways we can do that. At Just Better Care, we'll be planning to we already do some great staff survey work and getting the feedback from that and hearing staff through the survey work we do. But the face-to-face and creating those opportunities will be our focus area too, especially going on beyond 1 November, because I want to hear from the care partners how they're going, especially as we tip over into 1 November, and what's going to make their lives easier. Not that I'm there to get into operational work, but it just twigs me into perhaps some of the strategic areas we'll need to look at to support them further going forward in a sustainable way. So, yeah.
Anything to add, Sarah?
No, but I do agree. I think actually speaking face-to-face or online with direct care staff is really, really important, and can be quite eye-opening to some board members if they haven't done that before. So it's a really, really valuable tool, I think. Yep.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the walk the floor, and I really like it because I like to do that myself, but it's for insights. And then the question is, well, if I can't get the insight, and I have staff, all over the country, I can't walk all the floors at once, but how do I get those insights that I'm after? Are there other mechanisms that allow me to gain that information and intelligence? So again, creativity is key here, but once you know what you're really after, it's not walking the floor aimlessly. There's something I'm after. There's another way to get it, even in a different context. So I think that's really important. I think this one's a little bit related, but a different tangent. So what is your definition of supervise in the context of home-based workers who usually provide care and services in the individual's own home? Mm-hmm. So what does supervise look like? And
I can I can talk about that. So it's not necessarily standing over someone's shoulder and watching them do the work. I think there's two different aspects to that. So, for me, supervision is really about, working with the staff member outside of the client's home. So it's in a structured environment there. Where they're getting the support, identifying, professional development opportunities, and also talking through how they're going when they are working with older people. So it's really about looking at, what are some of the conversations they're having with older people? How are they delivering on the care plan? And really looking at that practice work that they're doing. So again, it's not looking over someone's shoulder and saying, hey, don't do that, do this, or whatever. It's making the time to develop the staff members. So it should be a really positive space for people. And I think I mentioned before around really having a good framework around what that looks like. And, it's going to be different for, an OT or a care worker or, a physio, but it's making sure that they've got the space to actually connect back with, their direct line manager, talk about the work that they're doing out of the field. Do they have any concerns? Are there any issues? Do they have any good suggestions about how they can make their work better and produce better outcomes for older people? So
yeah, beautiful, thank you. Now, I don't know what happened with this clock. I had green time and now I'm in the negative, so I apologise. I'm holding you up from lunch. So we'll have to wrap up the questions there. Look, I think the key thing is we know it's a very diverse and complex challenge that we're talking about here. It is different to residential, but the kind of assurances we need to seek at a board are the same. It's just different ways to obtain them. I do want to really restate, I would love to hear from you guys. There is a great opportunity for us to help educate, because education, I think, and understanding is the best foundation we can have. So I'd really appreciate to hear from you. So please reach out. Look, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to say a massive thank you to my amazing panel here. If people could give, yeah. I'd really like to thank their open and honest insight. It's brilliant. And look, thank you to you guys. Your questions were fantastic. There are, I'm not joking, another 20,000 here in the app. This is great info and insight for me about the information that we haven't provided to you already. So this will inform, we can improve our communication and hopefully answer all your questions. So thank you very much. Just housekeeping. It is lunchtime. So please, hopefully I haven't held you up so you're now at the back of a very long queue. But I'm happy to hang around for any further questions for people as well. So thank you very much all.